I am so excited today. We are going to dive deep into a topic that I feel like is not talked about enough, especially from the perspective that we're going to talk about it today. So today I have a dear friend of mine on, Niyc Pidgeon, and she is a positive psychologist, and she's going to help us with suicide prevention. Niyc, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited for this.
I'm very excited too, because we've been knowing each other for a long time, and I actually never knew there was a distinction, or I don't know the distinction between a psychologist and a positive psychologist. So can you kind of break that down for us?
It's so fascinating, and I get asked all of the time. So positive psychology, first of all, it's not just about being happy or being positive all of the time. That's a common misconception. And I think there's a lot of conversation around toxic positivity now.
Yeah.
And bypassing emotion. That's not what positive psychology is. So it was invented in the year 2000. So it's still super new, really. And it was invented originally as a counterbalance to psychology as usual, or traditional psychology. So traditional psychology focuses on disorder, disease, what goes wrong with people, how to unpack backwards trauma problems and really look at why they happened and how to heal them.
Right.
Positive psychology was invented to look more at human strength and virtue and look at what goes right with people rather than what goes wrong. So it was born in the year 2000, and it was really this counterbalance so that we can start to have something that's more progressive and looks at what we can do rather than just at what we can't do.
Right. That is so powerful. And and that's why I'm excited about looking at what we can do. Because everything you do and I do is all about prevention and it's all about a well-being now. And how can, no matter what has happened to us, how can we take control of our lives? And how can we live the life we want to live regardless of what happened? And it's Niyc's second time on the podcast. And the first time we talked about sexual assault. And now that we get into suicide prevention, a lot of people that experience small T and big T trauma are still left with a lot of unresolved feelings and emotions that they're dealing with sometimes for a lifetime. So can we just start there and kind of talk about where do we start when it comes to prevention, and maybe share how you started shifting things for yourself?
Yeah, and I feel so grateful, Koya, as well. Thank you for having this conversation, because like you said, it's often something that feels uncomfortable or taboo to talk about suicide prevention, to talk about sexual assault, these big topics, trauma. So what you're doing, bringing this forward, it's honestly, it's made me feel so seen and heard and comfortable in sharing the real behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because I think the first thing that we want to acknowledge is that everybody feels good and bad in their days, in their lives, in their weeks, and there's no shame around it. So I think first of all, it's really getting comfortable with the knowing that it's not just you, it's not just us that feels like we're having a bad day. And I think that's brought me a lot of peace in sharing with you, with Rob, with Natalie, with our other friends, that, you know what, like, I'm not feeling good today. So prevention, we want to really get ahead of suicidal thinking. I've been there, you've been there. There's so much that we can do to stop us going on that slippery slope before it's too late. Even if you're in crisis right now, there's things that you can do. There's hotlines that you can reach out to. But what I want to bring forwards with the new book, One More Day, is that we've all got the power to make a change. And it really starts with connecting with each other. It starts with connecting with ourselves. It starts with knowing that there is hope. And I honestly, like, I know I have big goals and I'm like the eternal optimist. I see a vision where suicide doesn't exist.
I love that. I love that. And I see that with you. I see that with you because as someone who has been there, and I love the title of your book, by the way, because One More Day, a lot of times, if you can just focus, because a lot of times I know for myself, when you're in the darkness, if you can just get past one more day, you see that things are not always going to be dark. And so I think that's a brilliant title, because I think it was Tyler Perry who said, if I had went through with it, then I wouldn't be experiencing this miraculous life that I'm experiencing now. And every time I feel down, I remember that. This is not going to last. And now every time I feel down, I'm going to think about just one more day.
One more day.
Just breathe through this bad time, through this bad day. But we all know that takes building up to, especially if you're experiencing trauma after trauma after trauma because you've been abused a ton. So can you start with sharing, like, what are the things that we can start doing? What are the steps we can start doing in our lifestyle to help us start building the capacity to deal with these traumas so we can get to one more day?
Yes, I love this.
Yeah.
And I developed a framework, which is very, very simple. And you know what it's like when you're developing a framework, you're thinking which step comes first.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of research in positive psychology to show that belonging is very, very important. Feeling like you have places to belong, whether that's an online community, whether that's in friendship, whether that is going to the gym or a club. But to actually get there and to put yourself out in the world and to get into community, that can feel like a mountain to climb when you're having a bad day. So I started to think what actually would be the step before that. And I know that you and I are both huge on rituals and practices and devotion. And I don't like the word discipline because it feels hard. It immediately feels like, oh, well, I can't do that one either. So rituals, practice, devotion, the love for yourself. And then I thought a step before that, I'm like, actually, you need to have the hope in the first place that there is actually going to be one more day, that you can live a miraculous life no matter what's happening in the world, no matter what's happening with the feelings inside of you. And you can trust that it's worth keeping going. So the first step is really knowing that you have the hope that it is possible to not just survive or not just have the resilience or resolve to bounce back. But what we know from positive psychology is that it's possible for you to go on to live stronger and happier than ever before.
Yeah, I think that's really important because a lot of people, when you're in it, you can't see that. You feel like, I can't live happy because of all these things that happen, all the abuse, or I'm in this narcissistic relationship and I want to stop. So what do you say to that person that's like, I ain't feeling one more day, Nick. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling one more day.
I think it's give me one more moment.
Yeah.
Like, give me this moment. Let's get super present. And what we know from positive psychology is that you can make a shift in a moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of the tools. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to take a long time. Sure, when you look back over a healing journey, so something like a sexual trauma or something like a breakup or grief or loss of a loved one, it can feel like when you look back, whoa, that took me years to actually get back to being my strongest self. But that we're not actually looking for the end goal. We're just looking right now. How can I feel a tiny little bit better in this moment? So reaching for a positive psychology tool, something like, I know you teach breath work, meditation. How could you make a positive choice with the food that you're eating? Because what happens then is you create a small win in your day. And I call these tiny tools. So I love a list. I'm like obsessed with the notes section of my phone. I have lists and lists and lists of all of the tiny little things that you can do. So it might be getting out for a walk. It might be texting you.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, like having a bad day, or hey, like tell me something good. I want to know what you're celebrating so that it can give me a lift and I can celebrate you.
Yeah.
So I think it's having I call them gateways. It's like the gateway, the tiny tool, the micro move that you can make.
Yeah.
So you're not getting overwhelmed with where am I going to be in 2 years' time or what's the big goal? Like the fact is, when you're suffering, you can't think about a big goal.
Yeah.
You just need to know that there's something that you can reach for in that moment. Put on your favorite song, move your body.
Yeah.
And that can create a shift.
I love that. Of all the things you mentioned, I think my tiny tool or I like micro movement too, is I love movement and music. You know, when I just turn on a song that inspires me, it lifts me up, or sometimes it just meets me where I am and how I'm feeling, it really does help me like cope with my emotions, either fully express my emotions, or if it's like, okay, I've been expressed, I need to get past it. I can turn on my favorite Beyonce or my favorite Beautiful Chorus and get beyond it. What are some of your favorite tiny tools that you use? You know, like kind of your top two. I know we have a lot, but what are your favorite go-to?
I love music as well. I think it's like such a healing energy of the universe. It's like a language in and of itself, and whether it's a lyric or it's just the feeling of it. Having been to Carnival in Trinidad and just seeing and feeling that rejoicing. And it's simple as well. Everybody can play music, they can play the sound bowls, or they can put on a song. They have access to sound in their day. I love movement. I was a personal trainer, as you know, for 10 years. So anytime that I can move my body, whether that is simply getting out for a walk, because sometimes, again, going to the gym, doing a full workout, doing something for an hour or 90 minutes can feel super hard. And I love breath work. So the thing that I want us to remember is that we really have access to so much in our own body without needing to go to a therapist or pay for the coaching program or do all of these things that feel like, well, it's all right for that person because they can afford it or they've got the energy to do it. So it's what can you do really simply for yourself in a moment? Get a glass of lemon water. These things that are really, really simple, but can start to create those changes.
I love that. And I feel like I like to stack. I like to stack my tiny tools because I feel like, especially when you're really overwhelmed and you're really in a dark place, it's not just one thing. You might go for a walk and still feel like crud. You might dance and then once you stop, you still. But I literally, depending on how down I go, I just do more and more to the point, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on a podcast yet, but when our friendship started to go deeper, I was in distress. And I was like, I am not okay. And we were talking about business. We were talking about doing stuff on Clubhouse. And I love business. And I love, you know, especially collaborations. But I was at a point that I was tapped out. And I remember I was just a place of vulnerability because I felt safe, you know, in the group. And I was just like, I just need a hug. You know, can we have dinner? You know, and I started there with asking because I know it can be hard. But one thing you mentioned earlier was community. And after I said, can we have dinner? I think almost every Tuesday after that, we met for dinner. So can you talk about the importance of community or reaching out, even when it's hard and being vulnerable and its role and how it can help you get to like one more day?
Yes, thank you. So thank you for, first of all, for asking for what you needed at that time. That shows that you had practiced feeling comfortable enough to ask the question. And I think that's something that I've really had to practice is, first of all, getting clear on what it is that I need. Like you knew that you needed connection and being able to ask for it and knowing that actually we all needed that as well. So when you're thinking about, okay, I need this for myself, it's also trusting that it's going to benefit other people as well. And it's so simple, getting together to eat. Everybody loves to eat. And just having that time and space together. Honestly, looking back on that, I needed that more than you knew and more than that I even knew for myself. And some days I didn't want to go. And I felt like that with therapy before as well. It's like, even though you know it's the best thing for you, there's some sort of resistance, whether it's, I feel so tired today. I've had such a hard day at work. Maybe I just won't go. The drive's 20 minutes, whatever the excuse or the feeling is. And I knew every single time that we got in that room that there was so much comfort. So much comfort in the simple things, like you say, like putting a blanket over yourself and being cozy with cozy socks, turning the lights down, looking at your amazing plants in the house, those simple things, and then being together with friends and knowing that we're there for each other. We love each other and there's no judgment. I think what's really important is knowing who your people are. And it doesn't have to be a huge community. It doesn't have to be, okay, I've got 100 friends and I'm opening up to all of them about all of the things all of the time. My invitation is always find the one person that you feel like you can have that honest conversation with. And that's always going to be enough to start with.
Yeah, because it was really hard for me. I wasn't practiced then, to be honest. Actually, if I think back on it, I had my best buddy, Nate the Great, and I would tell him probably maybe 60% of the things that was going on with me. But I had just started to develop adult friendships. And I actually had a really huge challenge. And I don't know if this is something you can go deeper in with adult friendship, because I was so focused on business. I was focused on business. I had a lot of people that I loved and I would see and we go to parties, but that's not the same as having deep conversations and being able to share your most vulnerable moments with someone. So can you talk about building an adult friendship? Because I think it's scarier than most people think. And a lot of us don't realize it's not present.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. Like, I love you so much. I just love hanging out and having these conversations because it's real life and it comes up so many times. Like, I have a lot of friends who'll reach out and they'll say, oh, this thing's coming up for me and I feel like I'm uncomfortable with other women, or I feel like everyone hates me, or I feel like everyone's talking about me. So I think, again, it's knowing that it's not just you, and it's these things that are personal are so universal as well. So when it comes to building friendship, I think it's looking at how can you be a good friend first. And you're a great friend, by the way. So it makes sense that you also receive great friendships. So I think it's how can you be in a place where you're caring for others as well as allowing yourself to be cared for. It's asking questions about how are you feeling today. One of the things you've given me is how are you feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10. And I use that in my other friendships all of the time now, because we're conditioned to say, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm great. And I think the point that you made about business, it's very interesting to have a personal brand, a business brand, and be showing up, being happy and successful all of the time. And people have a certain expectation or a certain view of you. So then naturally it can be challenging. I know I felt this as a positive psychologist who didn't feel positive all of the time. It's like, what are people going to think of me? Are they going to think I'm bad at my job? No, Nick, they just know now that you are human too. So people have said to me that they felt like they couldn't connect with me very well previously, and they didn't really know who I was because I almost had this big armor up, and it was like this brave, fearless business warrior. And yes, you can be that in business and you can lead the team and make the money and also soften and be vulnerable and allow yourself to connect. And I think that's one of the distinctions is, are you actually allowing yourself to fully lean back and be held in relationship to the point where you are having real conversations? And I think it's looking at what the edge is for you. So again, you don't have to tell everyone everything all of the time, but where might you be able to open up and get curious around sharing a story with someone or asking them what it is that they might feel vulnerable, but they really need to share right now?
Right. And I have a little bit of a deeper question. You know, as a positive psychologist, you mentioned something that I think we don't really talk about enough. Like, where does it come from, that thought of like, I'm going to be too much, or like, I can't really tell them what's really going on in my relationship, or I can't let them know, like, I actually am depressed right now, as a positive psychologist, as a life coach, we hold these pedestals and we want people to humanize us, but we're also very afraid to be vulnerable because we're afraid to be discredited, you know?
Oh, exhale.
I know, exhale. Right?
Yeah. And I think even looking for that exhale in your day or in your life and looking at where you feel that and what it is that's releasing and relaxing for you is very important to be mindful of. It is exhausting to pretend that everything is okay all of the time when it's not. So if you are looking to feel better, if you're looking to have more energy or feel happier or get through one more day, it's very releasing to be able to share what it is that doesn't feel okay in your day. And I think something that's important to acknowledge is the work that we do. I'm a stand for positive psychology because it's my expertise. I love it. I know that it works. It's proven in the science. It doesn't mean that I don't still do other modalities. I have done so much trauma work. I work with a therapist. I dive into all of the things because I'm a lifelong learner and I know that all experience is valid, and I want to really test and try ways to live a bigger, better, more peaceful life. So I look back at the example that you gave. It's like this perception of, am I going to fit in, or where do I belong, or what do people think of me? And I can remember a childhood experience which seems so silly when you think about it now, of I went to my friend's birthday party at her home, and I must have been about 5 years old. And the mum, my friend's mum, had put the wrong time on the party invitation. So when I arrived, the party was over. So it made me feel, because when you're young, you can't necessarily process, well, oh, it was just a mistake. It doesn't mean anything about me. As a child, I made that mean they don't want me. I'm not included. I don't belong. And what happens is you can't process it at that moment when you're so young, because you've just got a child brain. And it starts a pattern of thinking and behaving and being and decision making of, oh, well, maybe I don't belong. So then what do I have to do in order to feel like I do belong? And that might simply look like trying harder. It might look like people pleasing. It might look like distracting yourself so that you don't have to feel, whether that's TV or sex or addictions to alcohol or drugs. And the pattern can start to snowball in a positive direction or in a negative direction. So that when we do have our adult brains, there's maybe a behavior or a situation or something that's playing out in our life that we don't associate with the thing from when we were a kid, but has started to become destructive rather than constructive in our lives. So it might show up as, I'm blowing up all of my female friendships and I feel like I've got no friends. And it might be a big, big thing like that. Or it might be really subtle, like, I feel a little bit scared to have this conversation with my friend right now. It feels like an edge for me. But ultimately, it can be tracked back to something in our childhood, and we can do something about it to make it feel better today.
Yes, I love that. And we're going to keep going with that. Like, when someone's in that, they're blowing up friendships. They're like, I just don't feel comfortable around anyone. I'm experiencing social anxiety. As a positive psychologist, how would you coach them through to the next level?
Well, first of all, what's the result that you want? And you always hear me say this in business and with mindset and with emotions. Where do you want to be? What would it look like to be the best possible version of yourself in relationship? What would it feel like? How would you be showing up? What types of relationship, what texture of relationship would you have? And start from that, because even getting into that positive visualization state, it's an intervention called the best possible self. It's proven to increase your levels of hope and optimism and make it easier to reach your goals. So that's a really simple place that you can start. We then also want to take responsibility for the things that we can take responsibility for. So look at, is there something that I have done or a way that I have perhaps behaved or communicated, under-communicated or over-communicated, by the way. So sometimes it's the things that we don't say, right, rather than the things that we do say, that can actually start to build up patterns of being and communicating that aren't necessarily facilitative to that end vision that we want. So if we can look at, okay, I feel like maybe I can take responsibility for doing this thing or not doing this thing, then we can start to see more clearly what are the actions that I want to take, or where are the areas that I want to start creating change within. Right. What would be a positive first step towards that vision? Not going from where I am right now to where I want to be, but what might it look like to, instead of holding everything in, reach out to that person that I want to connect with. Yeah. Or what might it look like? I'm an introvert. What might it look like to, instead of canceling the thing all of the time, actually showing up and knowing that when I'm there, I'm practicing and I'm going to have a good time, or the other way around. not feeling obliged to do the things that you've signed up to do, and instead being vulnerable and being honest and say, you know what, instead of going out to dinner, I feel like it would be really nurturing for me and the way that I'm feeling, and also for our relationship. Could we stay in and eat tonight? I feel like it's super loud when we go out. We don't really get to connect as much. I'd really love to get to know you more and drop in.
I love that. I love that. And I love visualization, because I feel like if you can't see it, your energy can't attract it, right? But when you start to visualize the best case scenario, you actually see it, and then you can go deeper into feeling it in your body, and then you can have clarity around what it is. Because I feel like a lot of times we don't even know what we want. And if we don't know what we want, it's hard for us to manifest it into our lives.
Yeah.
So I love that visualization. And also when it comes to friendship, I feel like a lot of people have experienced a lot of trauma. How deep do you go into the inner child work that you mentioned before, like things that have happened in the past that are affecting the future? Because some people could be trying, but because of trauma, that's really what's coming up, you know?
Yeah.
But what is it where a person, okay, I keep blowing up these relationships, but I don't know why, right? Like how, so it's not about just, I'll reach out and then I'll develop a friendship and then it's gone again, right? So what would you say to that person that just can't figure out why they're not able to hold lasting friendship?
Yeah. So to give like a overarching view of what positive psychology is and where relationships lands within that, there's 6 things that we're looking for if we want to build a flourishing life, really successful relationships, communities, businesses, all across the board. So we're looking for positive emotions. We're looking for engagement. So things that you're connected with, that excite you, that aren't so hard that they're going to make you give up, but they're challenging enough for you to be able to feel like you're using your strengths within them. Relationships is a pillar of positive psychology. Meaning and purpose, accomplishment, and then also health. So in any area of your life, if you're looking to develop successful relationships, you can use that as a guide and as a framework. How am I touching on these 6 things? Right. So is this relationship bringing me positive emotions? Yes or no? How can I facilitate more positive emotions within it? Then when we look at the accomplishment pillar, now this is an interesting area of positive psychology, because it sounds like, again, gung-ho, like we're going to get it done, let's be successful, let's reach the goal.
Right.
But also within accomplishment is something called growth mindset. So that's the idea of it not just being about that goal or that outcome, but it actually being about the process and the journey along the way as well. And when we know that there's so much value in the process, it makes us more willing to look for the gold within the challenges, not just focusing on getting somewhere and being on that treadmill all of the time.
Right.
So if we can look at, I mean, in positive psychology, we're not doing trauma work. That would be a different body of work. But we don't just ignore the fact that hard things happen. We look at, okay, so what is something within the last week that has challenged you? And this is a proven intervention that is known to shift your well-being. So what is something challenging that's happened for you, I say, in the last week? And then how did that impact you or make you feel? And it's very easy to look at, well, it made me feel hurt. It made me feel upset. This person did this to me. I'm going to blame and complain. I cried for a day. I felt heartbroken. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't think straight. Now I've got brain fog. All of the things, downward spiral. Positive psychology honors what's happened in the way that you feel. It doesn't go into just bypassing that. We then also add on to ask, what was good about that though? What was the silver lining or the blessing or the lesson within it? And how has that helped you to learn and grow? So I think it could be something from your childhood that you look at. It could also be something that just happened today. And we're saying, well, actually, you know what? How are you stronger because of that? Or how did you deepen a friendship because of that?
Right.
I always look for what the win-win is and how can we be constructive and how can we move towards deeper connection.
Right.
And that might be through a hard conversation first. That might be through something that doesn't necessarily just feel like, oh my goodness, yeah, we're going to do the happy thing. We're going to go out together. It's like, you know what? I just really want to bring something to our friendship because I want to honor what I feel. And what you said the other day, it made me feel like this. And I'm wondering, can you hold space for me right now to communicate how I feel? Because I feel really scared to say this to you right now. And it feels uncomfortable. And I'm scared in case I'm going to lose our friendship. So is it okay if I just share this thing with you?
Yeah.
So it's almost like opening up the space or setting a frame for the thing that you want to bring forwards, knowing that you're doing it with the right person. And just trusting that it's more important that you honor the feeling and you practice than it is to do things the way that you've always done them.
I really love that. And like you said, practice is what's most important. Because even when I made the suggestion about the dinner, it's like the response could have been, oh, let me recommend a therapist to you. I don't want to get dinner. Or it could have been what we experienced, like, yes, let's have dinner. And even now, when I come to town, we try to get together, you know? And so I think it's being okay with both, because you know, whether it goes in the best case scenario or a different way, that you spoke up for what you needed. And I think that's the biggest thing a lot of us miss, especially as women. We don't speak up for our needs enough. And sometimes we don't even know what our needs are.
100%.
So how do you really figure it out? And I think the latter is more true. Sometimes we don't know what our needs are. So did you ever go through a process of like, okay, let me find out what my real needs are?
I'm literally still going through it.
Yeah.
I think it's knowing that the journey is never done. And I used to think when I get to a certain point, everything's going to be fine. And there's always another thing to practice, another thing to work on. Having the list of tiny tools has really helped me, because I can look at that and I can say, like, what do I feel like I need, or what do I feel like is going to be good for me right now? There's 50 things on the list. I'd never do all 50 in a day, but I might do 10 or I might do 15. And having a menu like that really helps. So I think having a brainstorm and listing out all of the things that you might need is very facilitative, because in the moments when you actually need to access them, it can be very hard. So I really like to remind myself that it makes me feel better when I reach out to a friend. I like to remind myself that it makes me feel better when I text someone gratitude. And that's for them, but it's also for me as well. And I end up in tears when I do that in the morning. I'm like, I love you so much. I'm so soft. Like, for a person that's very brave and courageous, I'm so soft on the inside. I think as well, it's asking for help. I've actually asked friends for help with understanding what to ask for help with. Now, that sounds ridiculous, but one of the ways that I noticed was I was in my home one day and I laughed and I shared with my friend. I said, look at the smoke alarms on the roof. It was going off in the middle of the night, and the ceilings are so high. I didn't know how to get the battery out to change it. So I just got a broom and I hit it. And he looked at me so confused and he said, why didn't you ask me to help you with that? And I thought, oh my goodness, people ask for help with the smoke alarms. And it was a huge landslide moment for me, because I've lived on my own in different places around the world for so long that I just started to find solutions for things instead of asking for help. So it's almost like I'm having to retrain my patterning of living and being in relationship to ask for what I need, and to also ask people to help me identify what it is that I need or what other people ask for.
That's powerful. That's probably because people don't know until you know. And I think that's why community is so important, because other people can see what you might not be able to see yourself. You might be like, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. But people are noticing your anxiety, or people are noticing you're like, oh, it seems like you're isolating a bit, not coming out as much, as something going on. And they can really ask questions to kind of bring things out that you didn't even know. And so I think that's absolutely beautiful. And another thing I want to ask you, I know I'm a very spiritual person and you are as well. And so what part does spirituality play? Because I know there's a lot of separation of the two. There's the science. And what do you feel about the connection and how important is your spiritual well-being in your mind when it comes to just getting through some of these harder things?
Honestly, I'd say it's the number one thing.
Yeah.
And I think we're talking about the same thing, whether it's science or spirituality. It's packaged differently, but it's actually the same thing. And it comes back to that framework of hope, devotion, and connection. It's having the knowing that you can feel better, and then the devotion to a practice for your own self-care, but that connection with higher power and purpose as well. I've been practicing Kundalini for 11 years now.
Wow.
And in the book, I walk through some of the different kriyas or mudras or meditations that you can actually use. And I think if everything else is going wrong, you come back to what it is that's possible. And I remember when I was really struggling for a time, my first thing that I would think of every day is all I have to do is get to class, get on my yoga mat, and get into prayer, get into meditation.
Yeah.
And that's all I have to do. It was my one thing. So it was really simplifying and coming back to what it is that's going to create the shift.
Yeah.
And you never have to do it alone. So even if you are feeling alone or you're lonely or you live somewhere where you don't have access to community and connection, you're never going to be alone when you have a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
So that is something that the devotion piece comes into. Could you just practice meditation and prayer for 3 minutes a day and see how that makes you feel? Because most things in life aren't guaranteed, but I feel like that is guaranteed to make you feel better more of the time.
100%. I mean, I definitely feel like we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Yeah. And when you go back to your spiritual core, it helps you get through some of the things that are happening in your human experience, because it is going to be all over the place, because it's not just us. We are interacting with so many people, some people that are more well than others, and some people that are going through a lot of despair and trauma. And I feel like that is where the polarity comes in, because you mentioned before about, sometimes feeling like, I don't want to, and sometimes feeling like you do. When you're experiencing that polarity, and I gotta get a little personal, like, do you have, what is one of your lowest moments as you've experienced, since we had our last conversation? Because I know we've talked about stuff in the past, but my biggest thing is I tell people I'm going through this all the time. Like, I'm constantly learning and growing. So can you share a personal dark moment for yourself and how you kind of use your tools to get through?
Yeah, I mean, I have felt suicidal 5 times in my life. It's something that it's interesting for me because not everybody gets there. I had a friend when I went back to the UK and she said, I just don't get mental health. I don't understand it because I never feel bad.
Wow.
And that was fascinating for me, that there's this huge spectrum of emotion and suffering and striving and thriving. I have felt, I had a suicide attempt when I was 11. And since then, I've known that I will never, ever, ever try and take my own life again.
Yeah.
And I've thought about it. So the thought is present in my reality. And usually when I have felt it again, it's been when I've been sick. It's been when I've been really emotionally exhausted and tired. And when I have felt like there's no way out.
Right.
So I felt like that when I've been in a relationship that was abusive, and I felt really, really trapped. And I can literally remember exactly where I was and exactly what I was doing. So when I was struggling in that experience, I knew that I had to make a change because I couldn't sleep.
Right.
So it was the sleep that was actually the torture for me, because I would fall asleep and wake up after 2 or 3 hours and not be able to get back to sleep. Now, that was because of the distress that I was experiencing in my wider life that was then it was kind of coming up as a symptom with the insomnia.
Right. So
that was the thing that drove me to go and see a doctor. And it was in that moment where I thought, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be here.
Right.
And it's what we often say, it's not that somebody wants to die. It's not that somebody necessarily wants to end their life, but it's the pain of being here, the pain of living, whether it's something like sleep or it's an overwhelming feeling of the way I've experienced it before is it feels like the walls are closing in. I've said that to myself. Oh my God, it feels like the walls are closing in, or I feel like I'm underwater.
Right.
Those type of feelings. And what's given me comfort and solace is knowing that those feelings and thoughts are temporary. So, crazy story, one of my friends was about to take her own life. Someone that you would never expect, high-powered woman, amazing family relationships. She was on the top of a roof about to take her own life. And what stopped her was that she went to grab her phone to message her husband and her kids, and she couldn't find her phone. By the time she found her phone, she was like, I can't believe I was ever going to do that.
Wow.
So it's a fleeting thought. And I think knowing that it's fleeting can help you hold on.
Right.
One more moment, one more hour, one more day.
I love that. And I'm glad you're here, and I think it's so important for us to celebrate, each other's lives and those small celebrations outside of like big accomplishments of like a book or a relationship. I feel like celebration, just getting through a hard moment or a tough moment or an insecure moment, we need to celebrate ourselves more. Getting through a day, getting through this podcast, you know? And I feel like we just go through and check off boxes and we're not celebrating. And then we get overwhelmed when bad things happen because we haven't had enough gratitude and celebration. So what part does gratitude and, just being like regulating your emotions, right? Around the things that are happening in your life when it comes to prevention.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So gratitude shifts you into a positive emotional state and place. It's also interesting because gratitude is one of the topics or interventions or principles that is known to help if you're feeling depressed as well. So some of the tools work when you're feeling good and you want to feel better. But things like gratitude, things like uncovering what your strengths are, starting to know more about your personality so that you know that everybody has things that they're good at. And being able to apply those in your day, that can give you a boost. It can give you that little lift. And we have a practice in our team and with friends as well called the Gratitude Rampage, where we'll go on WhatsApp. And I remember walking around Miami and I was messaging my COO. I said, what are you grateful for? And she sent me one thing and then I sent her one thing, and you go back and forwards. And what happens is instead of being in that downward spiral, you go into an upward spiral. And it's like, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for health. I'm grateful for the sunshine. I'm grateful for the air. I'm grateful for this moment. I ended up grateful for gratitude and in tears when I was walking down the street.
Wow.
And it's the remembering of the ease of access to a better feeling in a moment that is so, so important. I have rituals with some of my friends that I know are really struggling at the moment. Every Friday morning, I have an alarm in my phone that says, what has gone well this week? And I'll message my friend or I'll voice note her and I'll say, what are your highlights of the week? What's gone well? And sometimes it is, I was on this TV show or this amazing thing happened. Often it's, I'm really grateful, and what's gone well is our conversations and me being able to be honest.
That's powerful.
So it doesn't always have to be a big thing. The little things are the big things too.
It's the little things, as Indy Irene would sing. And I think it is the little things that, because people, the listenership of this podcast is international, and people can celebrate simple things, or having a warm meal. Having a meal, having a meal, period. Right. For me, I say one day at a time, one breath at a time. So sometimes I'm just grateful that I'm breathing and that I can take a deep breath, because I can get so worked up. I'm taking shallow breaths. Right. So I'm like, I'm grateful for this deep breath. So I agree with you. It's just the littlest things sometimes that can bring us back to alignment with who we truly are. And I also know like there are different areas of life that can really pour in to a positive mindset about living and about being here. Mm-hmm. So what are some of those other things that you recommend a person really tap into so that they can bring a little bit more to their toolbox? Like you have a lot, I have a lot, but a lot of people are listening, they don't have a lot.
Yeah. I think it's looking for what feels good for you. So we talk about a person activity fit. Now that's like a very practical way to say it, but it's do the things that feel good.
Yeah.
And don't force yourself to do the things that don't feel good.
Yeah.
So for me, Kundalini breath work and chanting, I love the voice. I love shamanic shaking, moving my body. That feels really good for me. Felt very weird when I started it. Feels really, really good for me. It might not feel good for someone else. So what might feel good for someone else is practicing prayer. Feels good for me too, by the way.
Yeah.
What might feel good for someone else is having a healthy eating practice. What might feel good for someone else is going in the infrared sauna or just getting outside into daylight. It doesn't have to be hard or expensive. I always think, what is the swap that you can make? So you and I have been for saunas and ice baths before. What would be a swap for that would be splashing cold water on your face. Okay, that's going to give you an instant shift in your state.
Yeah.
And going in the sun or cuddling up with a little blanket. Those type of things where it's like, what feels nurturing to me right now.
I love that. And I feel like sometimes for me, especially when I'm feeling really down and maybe I am feeling antisocial and I just want to be with myself, it is those little things like spending time in nature, you know, grounding down with my feet on the ground, cuddling up in my bed, maybe spraying my favorite scent or having a piece of fruit like an orange or
sensation.
Sensation, smell, looking at beautiful things. Like I love looking at things in nature. Also love coloring. Like that's very therapeutic. And I agree there's so many things that can just bring you peace that we might not think about. We might think about the big things like the saunas and the ice bath and the therapy, which they're good too. But there's so many little things that we can do to really regulate how we're feeling and just bring ourselves back to like gratitude.
And what you're talking about there is that feeling and sensation of awe. So you look at the plants and you're like, the plants just grow. That is amazing. We don't have to do anything. Mother Nature can give us that feeling of being so small in its enormity. You can also get that sense of awe in me looking at you and I'm like, you're so gorgeous and beautiful as a human. I just love you. Or seeing a baby take their first steps. The feeling of awe is actually proven to help us feel better. It's proven to actually help facilitate more pro-social behaviors. So it helps us be more kind, more generous. It helps us connect with others. So it's free. It's free to look at the plants or look at the waterfall or go out and put your feet on the grass and really appreciate what we already have around us. And activating that sense of awe, it actually also works on pictures. So you don't have to be outside. You could look at a photo of a waterfall, activate the sense of awe, and that is going to help you feel better and get through one more day.
I love that. I love that. And what do you feel like when it comes to lifestyle design, which is now what this podcast is really focused on bringing to people, when it comes to your lifestyle and kind of what you've built for yourself? Like, what is coming? Like, what do you see? Like, if you can take yourself on the best case scenario, kind of paint the pictures of the next 5 years of your life for us.
Yeah, well, I think having gone through so many health challenges with mold poisoning and adrenal fatigue and things like that in the past, as well as having had these scary moments of such extreme unsafety and trauma that has led me to sleepless nights and things like that. My health is my priority. It's one of my core values. And it's something that is so important to me because I've been in those moments where I felt like I don't have it. And just how it feels to not be able to use your body normally or feel vibrant and energized. It's put me on a path where in my day, that is the most important thing first. So it is things like me doing a workout, moving my body, sweating is so good for you.
Yeah.
It is things like drinking electrolytes. It's going in the sauna, doing the ice bath. It is having fun and finding the joy.
Yeah.
And 5 years' time, I mean, I see us being on spaceships, I'm sure.
That sounds fun.
But living our most vibrant life because we've looked after ourselves first. It's thinking about, yes, we can save the world, and I want to. I'm on a mission to save lives, but you can't save everybody else until you save yourself first.
That part. Yeah. And now you kind of went a little bit into it, but where do you see society? Best case scenario, because I know we're going through a lot right now, but give me the best case scenario. If everyone develops this mindset of positive psychology and we start to be more well, what can the world look like?
Some of the research recognizes suicide as a behavior. And when you think of it as a behavior, you realize that a behavior can be changed. So I think about when I was a kid and I used to go on airplanes on vacation and people would be smoking. Like, that is just outrageous to think that anyone would smoke or smoke on an airplane. It's just wild to me that ever happened.
Yeah.
I want the same feeling about suicide. I want people to look back and be like, whoa, remember when people did that?
Yeah.
That was crazy. I want it to be that type of shift that we experience where people are more resourced and they know ahead of time. Kids grow up learning connection and positive psychology and positive emotions and gratitude and kindness. It's taught in schools, it's taught in homes, and that ripple effect extends out far and wide.
Right.
That's the vision.
I love that. I'm excited about that in 5 years.
Well, thank you for being part of it.
Right? I'm excited about being part of it. So your first book that I have in my hand now is your chance, is available now. And I'm so excited about it. And then your book coming up, One More Day, when is that due out?
So that is coming out on World Suicide Prevention Day, actually.
Brilliant.
September the 10th, 2024. And we're going to be doing pre-sale before that. It just feels like the most important work that I can do in the world.
Yeah.
I didn't think I would become a positive psychologist, so compelled to talk about suicide prevention, but it's the most joy-filled thing that I have ever worked on because there's so much hope that we can make a change.
Ashe. I love that. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a dear friend. Thank you so much for the beauty that you're bringing the world. And thank you so much for the heart and soul you put into this book and the book One More Day. And you're just constantly pouring love and positivity despite all of the things that you've been through. I always see you as resilient and powerful and even now more vulnerable. Like, I love seeing your vulnerable side, and it lets me know that you are human and you do have hard times, but you're also an incredible light worker and someone who's bringing some of the most, consciousness to the planet. So thank you for being you. I appreciate you more than words.
Thank you. I love you.
Love you. Oh, she's so beautiful. All right.
So good.
So until next time, love yourself, love others, love the world, one day at a time, one breath at a time. Peace and love.